In this video, I'm going to be talking a little bit about AI Limit. It is a new Soulslike that is coming out in March. If you haven't heard of it before, there's actually a demo right now that's available on Steam that I actually got to check out. I hadn't had time to play it. I've been meaning to play it. A lot of people are talking about this game, making comparisons of it to Code Vein. I've even seen people calling it Code Vein 2, so obviously this is a game that I have been keeping an eye on. Now, if you're a fan of Souls-like games, you'll notice a lot of familiar mechanics right away. The methodical combat, painful enemies who take off huge chunks of your health with a single attack, and that constant feeling of tension and risk and reward. But I think what makes AI Limit stand out compared to some other Souls-like games is that it's a little bit less challenging. It's not as punishing as some maybe Souls-likes might be, and I find it to be a little bit more approachable for new players or players that are new to Souls-likes who might shy away from the challenge of a lot of these games. So what is AI Limit? It's a game from the Chinese studio Sense Games, which is part of the PlayStation China Hero Project, which is a program that PlayStation runs to help indie devs in China create, publish, and market their games. We've been seeing a lot of good games coming out of China recently. Black Myth Wukong was obviously a big hit. Phantom Blade Zero is another one that's on our radar, and this one is as well. This one will be releasing on March 27th of this year, which is not that far away, for PlayStation 5 and PC via Steam. What I like about this game too is that it will have a PC and PlayStation 5 simultaneous launch. Usually when we see games that are published by PlayStation, they're usually timed exclusives where they have like 1 or 2 years before they come out on PC. But with this one, that's not the case. It'll be launching on PC and PlayStation 5 on the same date. Enough of that though, let's get into the game. The demo starts with you waking up in the sewers, not knowing why you're actually there, and it does kind of remind me of Code Vein's opening a bit, where you similarly wake up lying down in a puddle. The only difference here is that there is no silver-haired lady attending you. I guess in this game, you're playing the silver-haired lady. That's a joke. Anyway, after trying to move around, you'll notice immediately that you can spam dodge rolls without stamina dropping, and you won't even see a stamina gauge. You get to pick up your first weapon and are immediately introduced to the controls of the game, which are pretty straightforward. You get to use your right shoulder buttons to attack in the game, and you're also introduced to the sync rate system, which is pretty unique to this title. What it does is it fills up when you attack an enemy using your melee weapon, and it drops whenever you get hit. Pretty standard stuff. What makes it special is that it also gives you a damage boost the higher your sync rate percentage is. Conversely, if your sync rate drops to a certain level, you also get damage reductions, so you also get punished a different way when you get hit by enemies. The sync rate bar was the only gauge there apart from my health, and that actually led me to conclude that there's really no stamina mechanic in this title. AI Limit encourages you to experiment with spells, which you can get after defeating certain enemies. For example, I picked up a railgun spell from a mini-boss that's great for long-range damage, but it eats 25% of your sync rate, so you have to use it smartly. The whole system pushes you to stay aggressive and make smart choices about when and how to spend your resources. It reminds me a bit of Bloodborne in that regard, where playing passively usually doesn't work out as well. You can also pretty much spam your dodges and dodge rolls, which makes things convenient, but that doesn't really mean that you can just spam your abilities without repercussions. Whenever you use an ability, like a weapon ability, or you put up a shield, then it does consume your energy and lowers your sync rate gauge. And if you manage to deplete your sync rate, it will stun you badly. Depleting your sync rate is a pretty hard thing to do, though, completely, unless you're spamming your abilities, getting hit often, and not melee attacking at all. Defensively, you do have options as well, like the ability to parry or a shield that absorbs hits and shoots a blast after charging. Both come with trade-offs. A missed parry costs sync rate and health, while the shield drains sync rate over time, so you have to use it wisely. I leaned on the shield more often since my parry timing is, well, pretty questionable, and frankly the game has a parry timing that's kind of all over the place. It seems like in certain bosses the parry timing is very easy, but when facing certain enemies it's almost impossible to do with regularity, so I think some tweaking needs to be done in this regard before the launch of the title. One of the things I thought was really nice about AI Limit is the variety of enemies you get to encounter so early on. I mean, there are monsters you first encounter and their variations, monsters who actually use equipment, including that one monster that uses a giant pipe as a battering ram / baseball bat. There are also androids that are hostile to both you and the monsters, a giant android that shoots out these big lasers that can pretty much kill you if you don't duck for cover, and human enemies like fellow bladers who use weapon types that you could use, and there's also a guy with a flamethrower. Something that is cool about these enemies is that they have dynamics. If an android encounters a group of monsters, it'll drop what it's doing just to kill them. They can also be useful for clearing rooms filled with monsters as well. Another thing to talk about regarding the game's enemies is that you obviously also need to figure out the attack pattern of some of these because a lot of them don't have visual cues when they attack. Most of the attacks, even basic ones, aren't exactly telegraphed, which does make fights a bit challenging if you're first time encountering an enemy. Customization-wise, the game has plenty of weapon choices, each with their own strengths. You can equip 2 melee weapons and switch between them mid-combo without worrying about weight limit. There's no weight limit in AI Limit, so you can mix and match weapons as long as you meet the stat requirements. And what's cool is if you switch in the middle of a combo, sometimes it will trigger a special attack, not unlike Phantom Blade Zero. And I don't know if you can use every weapon type that's in the game during the demo. I would be shocked if this was the case, but there are a lot of weapons available in the demo, including dual swords that have quick slash attacks to great swords that hit really hard but have slower attacks. And I even saw a missile launcher in the game's trailer that's not in the demo, unfortunately, so it seems like there's going to be some cool weapons for sure. And there is equipment you can equip as well, like headgear, armor, and amulets, and changing that does change your character's appearance, which is great. But I don't know if there's like a transmog system where you can make your character look how you want and use the gear that you want if it looks different, so we'll have to see. And just like in other Souls games, you can level up and upgrade your character when you use bonfires or branches, which are the equivalent of bonfires in AI Limit. And you do have 5 attributes you can choose from, and the game explains what happens if you invest in those, which is great. So you'll kind of upgrade your character in a similar way as you might expect, with the crystal amount needed to level up getting higher and higher as you get higher in level. Visually, AI Limit really grabs your attention, especially when it comes to the atmosphere. The game kind of combines futuristic tech with this gritty, almost dystopian feel that works really well in my opinion. You've got broken machines, weathered objects, and everything feels like it's been through the ringer a little bit. It's the kind of world that feels lived in, where things have fallen apart over time. The lighting, the shadows, the visual appearance of the game all build this tense, foreboding vibe, like something's always lurking just out of sight. And the way objects and debris move around makes the world feel alive, like it's reacting to you instead of just standing still. And also the UI is really seamless and unobtrusive, which is exactly what a good UI should be. That said, I do feel like some of the character and enemy designs could use a little more polish. The androids, for example, look cool at first, but they don't always feel like they belong in the environment. They're too clean, especially when the rest of the world is so messed up. It's like they were just dropped in there without considering the setting. Take Lore of the Lost Lancer, for example. The whole place you fight him in is covered in mud and wreckage, but Lore himself still looks pretty spotless. It kind of pulls you out of the moment a bit, but overall the art direction is phenomenal. Final thoughts. AI Limit has a lot of potential. I would even go on to say that this game would probably be a good gateway to Souls-like games, since it's a bit more lenient compared to other Souls games, because you don't lose much when you die. I also think that doing away with the stamina gauge in favor of the sync rate gauge is a very bold move, as well as removing the weight limitations. Changing an already proven recipe isn't something that makes or breaks a game, just look at Marvel's Rivals. I found a lot of things about this game that I actually liked. The attack animations, diverse enemy designs, variety of weapon choices, and the wealth of build options are pretty impressive already. For a demo that only covers the first boss, it already feels like there's a lot of things going on and a lot of things to do in the game. In the Boss Rush Challenge, where you have access to tons of late game gear, I found myself invested in improving my character and brainstorming builds I'd like to try in future playthroughs. However, I do have a few gripes. Some of the controls feel awkward, like the requirement to sprint before jumping. Considering how short the jump distance is, it's almost hilarious. The player movement can also feel stiff and unresponsive at times, which removes the fluidity of the game experience. The game also doesn't feel incredibly well optimized for PC yet, which does end up with players experiencing some frame drops here and there. It's not that bad since it's just a demo and the final product will probably have some improvements, but I am hoping that the full release of this game in March plays a little bit smoother than the demo. So far, I've really enjoyed my time with AI Limit, playing the demo and through that and seeing what the game has to offer so far. Definitely appeals to me as a Souls player and a Souls-like fan, and I can see the comparisons to Code Vein almost immediately when playing the game. I'm a huge fan of Code Vein. There were issues with that game, but I think overall the gameplay of Code Vein was absolutely phenomenal, and I really like the gameplay of AI Limit so far. I'm curious what you guys make of it, having seen the gameplay. Have you guys played the demo on Steam? Are you going to go download it and check it out? Let me know what you make of it so far. This game comes out on March 27th. There are a ton of games coming out in this time period, including the first Berserker Kazan, which is another kind of Souls-like game. It's more in the action RPG genre than Souls-like, I would say, but it's going to be a game that kind of competes in this space. Obviously, Monster Hunter is coming out in late February, even though it's not a Souls-like game. I think a lot of Souls-like players will be playing it. So what do you make of the timing of this launch? What do you make of it? Is it something you're going to keep an eye on? Let me know in the comments below.